these actors are giving it their all. The set design, the lighting, there's a lot of work that goes into stuff. So I like to respect other art forms. And, don't get me wrong, I like good trash TV.
You just heard from this week's guest. I'm Chris Simon, and today I'm joined by my co-hosts David Hyde and Christian Gossett. Welcome to the Superfan podcast, where the people who make the comics you love talk about the things they love that aren't comics. Thank you as ever to Low and the Shag for our theme song. This week's episode is brought to you by Fanbase Press and Superfan Promotions. Today we're talking with cartoonist Johnnie Christmas about his love of Midnight Mass, the acclaimed TV show from creator Mike Flanagan.
All right, so we normally dive right into the conversations with our guests, but look, there's a lot of you that have not seen Midnight Mass, which is tonight's subject. So today we want to set the scene for you, all right? So let's begin with Netflix's summary. And here's how they describe it. Midnight Mass. The arrival of a charismatic young priest brings glorious miracles, ominous mysteries, and renewed religious fervor to a dying town desperate to believe. Dun, dun, dun. Little do they know what those miracles are coming from. Sorry, I did a vampire sound.
Yeah.
Did you get that?
I did.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Vampire sounds are fun. So Netflix, as always, short, succinct, right to the point, but it doesn't completely set your expectations for the journey you're headed on in tonight's podcast. So here's what Collider had to say in their review, read to you by Superfan podcast co-host Chris Simon.
Thank you.
Hey.
So Midnight Mass is not the show you're expecting. And Lord help me, I'll try my best to prepare you. Because Mike Flanagan's name is on the bill, assume you're getting a horror story that digs directly into the human psyche, one deeply interested in the ways people feel about loss, regret, and redemption. A self-described former altar boy about to celebrate 3 years of sobriety, Flanagan has seemingly poured every thought and worry about humanity's place in the cosmos into Midnight Mass. And the result is a dense, profound experience, like listening to your smartest friend try to make sense of the stars in the night sky. That's quite a review.
Did you like it, Chris Simon?
I did.
Did you? I liked the beginning more. A lot of shows like that, I like the setup more than conclusions are always bumpy. But either the one that Gossett watched or the one before, to me, it started to swerve towards we're headed towards something that's less interesting to me, right? But I loved parts of it a lot. I found parts of the beginning really kind of amazing.
So who is Johnnie Christmas? Johnnie Christmas is a #1 New York Times best-selling graphic novelist and the author of Gamerville. His 2022 middle grade graphic novel debut, Swim Team, earned a spot on the National Book Awards long list and received a Coretta Scott King Award Illustrator honor. It also won the BC ALA Literary Award, the Black-Eyed Susan Award, the Maud Hart Lovelace Award, and the Yellowhammer Award, with many nominations, including the coveted Eisner and Harvey Awards. He is the writer and co-creator of the sci-fi series Tartarus, and his book Firebug earned a Joe Shuster Outstanding Cartoonist nomination. Additionally, he co-created the series Angel Catbird with celebrated writer Margaret Atwood. Yes, that Margaret Atwood. And adapted William Gibson's lost screenplay for Alien 3 into a critically acclaimed graphic novel of the same name. A graduate of Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York, he earned a BFA in Communication Design and Illustration. A dual citizen of the United States and Canada, Johnnie makes his home in Vancouver, British Columbia.
First, we're going to do a note about spoilers. We're going to try to avoid major spoilers, but we'll also want to let the conversation evolve. If you haven't finished the show, please proceed with caution.
And with no further ado, Mr. Johnnie Christmas, welcome. Let's talk Midnight Mass. All right, so a lot of episodes of the Superfan podcast trace someone's fandom as it evolves over decades, but that's not what's happening tonight. Midnight Mass, it came out on Netflix in 2021. So, Johnnie, what was it that brought you to Midnight Mass?
Well, it was, first of all, thanks for having me on your podcast, guys. I'm super excited about it. Been a fan of David's for a long time, so it's an honor to be here. A friend of mine recommended it, and it was one of those recommendations that one gets where your friend knows you like a thing, and they're just kind of like, oh, wait till wait till you see this thing, you know? So it was recommended, and I was like, all right, cool. You know, I gave it a shot, and I fell completely into it. I think it was my love of, vampire lore, of course, and ritual. You know, I love lots of ritual and almost any culture, like anything kind of cultural or ritual. I just kind of fall into that. And this was just a beautiful combination of both.
Wow. So by ritual, do you mean like, did you grow up religious or?
I grew up Methodist. So I'm no longer a person who's practicing in any faith, but I always found it comforting, all the rituals that kind of went along with it, and the order and the stories, of course, being a storyteller, I think that kind of brought me in. So all the rituals of the church were kind of very soothing to me.
That makes sense. I feel like a lot of people feel that way about religion. I myself grew up Catholic, hardcore. So when I watched this, let me tell you, I was so into it. I was so into it because I knew all of the hymns that they were singing. I knew all the masses, everything the priest was saying. It was just crazy. And I just got so sucked in simply because he seamlessly wove the Catholic religion, or the Christian religion, I should say, into his whole vampire story. And I was like, my mind was blown. So I totally get what you mean by that, like from a storytelling point of view and a religious point of view.
And I'll jump in here and say I was raised Roman Catholic, and like lapsed is a generous way of saying that I'm not practicing and have not been for a long time. Sorry, Mom, who was probably going to be listening to this episode. But I do think you definitely bring whatever your experience is with religion and ritual to the show. And I did find like the music and the hymns like really resonated with me, and it stayed in my head, especially the early episodes of the show, like really just lived in my head rent free. And I was like shaken after most episodes early on, but like ready for more.
Johnny, what are some of the moments that stand out to you offhand?
So we're trying to avoid spoilers. Is that
right?
it?
Right.
Well, I mean, I feel like it's impossible to do that. To be honest,
we did say spoiler warning.
Spoiler warning. The big one for me is Riley in the boat at the end of episode 4, I believe. The Book of Lamentations. It was just like so beautifully woven into they alluded to this dream that he had, and he's on the boat and he's riddled with guilt, and the very first scene of the entire show is his back of his car. He has the Jesus fish on the back of it.
That's right.
Flash with these police lights. So he's like so at the beginning he's a man of faith, but he's a man with an addiction, and he battles. He pushes away the one, and he gets one under control, but pushes away the other. And he's always telling Erin throughout the show how much stronger she is than he is. So the best he can do at that moment is to inform her that this is the limit of his strength. Like I'm going to let you know what's going on. And of course, Erin at the end of the show takes action. Like she actually gets this information and does something. But I don't know. It was beautifully woven together. His resolution with his with the young woman he murdered at the beginning of the show. This is not a spoiler because the show opens on a car accident where he was drinking and he murdered a young woman. And he's riddled with guilt. He goes to sleep every night and he sees her, and he sees her again in the boat. And there's this kind of coming together, and we're broken out of this beautiful, serene moment with the sounds of Erin screaming. It was really jarring, and even when they rolled credits, you're hearing Erin continue to scream, was super powerful. So that's the most powerful moment in the show for me. You guys? Was this your first Mike Flanagan Netflix show you discovered? It was. I didn't. I'd heard the buzz about Haunting of Hill House, but I didn't see it, and I just kind of didn't really pay much attention. So when this was recommended to me, I had no frame of reference for anything that he'd done, or that he used the same, cast in many of his works. And I've since gone on to watch the House of Usher and Life of Chuck. So I'm looking forward to seeing some other things. Oh, and also, what was the movie? It was like one of his first movies. It was called like Hush or something like that.
Dr. Sleep, was that the one, or Hush?
Hush.
No?
It was Katie Siegel alone in a house with a murderer, kind of in the woods.
I remember that one.
Yeah. That was. So I've seen that one as well.
Yeah,
and that movie is called Hush from 2016.
Okay, thanks, David.
Nice. That was a while ago too. Mike Flanagan is also a recovering alcoholic. So, it's kind of interesting that he wrote, this whole thing about, this guy in the beginning who's an alcoholic and then, kills someone drunk driving and then has to go into AA meetings. And weirdly, he wrote all this, I think it was 6 years before he got sober, which is, it's kind of interesting to think about that. But he put some of his own fears into it, because while he was an alcoholic, he always had a fear that that's what he would end up doing is going out and making a bad decision and hurting someone, which I thought was really great for him to admit, first of all, and second of all, to pour out all of his trauma onto the page and make something out of it that, was just really meaningful and powerful. Just thought it was,
Does it resemble your writing at all, Johnny? Are there any connection points at all?
I think the layers of ritual and world building and that sort of thing really spoke to me. I think there's a similarity in my work in that way, very much so. I loved all the layers to it, and you could tell that he thought very deeply about it. Because, as you say, Chris, he lived. A lot of this was lived, and I'm assuming he was Catholic as well. And this is just an assumption I'm having based on how deep this went and how it seemed like he lived with all these things for a very long time. Like, this thing was marinating. It was in the pot. It was stewing together in a way where all these like layers of things were connecting in a way that a person only connects these things if they thought about it for a really long time and lived it.
Sure.
Even when he was bringing together like AA meetings in the Catholic Church, when they hold up the chip at the AA meeting, and Father Paul is holding up the body of Christ, it's the same circular shape, and he's before a certain window. There's just all these things that are just so nicely layered that was like really respectable. So I hope my work has that much nuance in it, but that's the sort of thing I strive for. And also that all the characters have something that they want. Everyone is out for something, and there's no pure villain, truly. I mean, Bev Keane is about as close as you get, and she's pretty villainous, but but everyone else is really just kind of, Sturge, her kind of guy who's just doing her bidding, and Wade the mayor. They're kind of working out of fear, because she's the smartest person in town, and she just wraps their head around with this with scripture, and they don't know if they're coming or going after she's done with them, and she just kind of sets them off as these little minions, and at the beginning of it, you're not even sure, like, she doesn't have a plan to destroy the island, at the beginning of the show, because she's just being the local busybody, and the local holier than thou person. So, but when these opportunities fall into her lap, she kind of makes these choices that benefit her in the short term, but destroys things for the community in the long term, like taking the oil settlement that, kind of destroyed the economy of the whole, place. And now when this miracle lands on their laps, she then takes it upon herself to start doing this set of actions that kind of spill out in an unexpected, disastrous way.
Yeah, she kind of uses scripture as like a weapon. She like shapes it to her will. Like whatever she wants, she can just call up a piece of scripture that supports it,
Yeah.
It's Creepy.
And there's always a Sturge. Always. Whenever there's someone like Bev Keen, they can find a Sturge to go, all right.
Right.
Yeah, sure. I'll gear up, beat up whoever you want.
So I want to go back to this recommendation from a friend because they know that you love vampire content, right? So you watch the first episode. Do you immediately start episode 2? Do you wait a week? Do you binge it all at once?
I think I may have binged them like 2 at a time or something. I think after the first one, I was intrigued at how, they alluded to a lot of stuff, but they didn't, go crazy with jump scares or anything, that would try and keep the audience in a very flashy kind of way. So that gained my respect. I thought, oh wow, these folks have 7 episodes and they're taking this first episode to introduce us to all of these characters, get a taste of who they are, what they want, and we end up with a beach littered with cats, So it's like, okay, well let's see where we go from there. And then after the second episode, I was fully hooked to the Lisa's miracle and the things that start to unfold, and the creature is starting to stalk humans at this point. So at that point I was like, oh well, all right, here we go. Like, I gotta see where this goes.
Did you rewatch or just once?
Yeah, so I did a rewatch, and then when I knew we were going to do this, I gave it a rewatch again. So I did 1, and then like 2 watches this year. So that's why I'm able to recall a lot of it. I made little notes, but because it was one of those things where I knew I would rewatch, but it was one of those like, okay, every 5 years maybe I'll take a look at it kind of thing. So it was a pleasure having this opportunity to dive into it again so soon.
Yeah.
I had a little bit of a push-pull relationship with especially those early episodes that I would love them so much. Like they really, the music stayed in my head, the vibes stayed in my head all day long. And I could not wait to start one, and then I'd be so relieved when it was over. And then it would, like, that cycle would start again, right? And it made me think, like, we could have talked about so many different things. We could have talked about Bob Marley. We could have talked about the Beatles, right?
I love those.
What made you ultimately, like, land on this, like, as something to have a conversation about?
I think it tied together with my love of story more. Whereas if we talked about the Beatles or Bob Marley, I think we would have gone into the wonder of their lives and the circumstances that those artists came from and where they arrived and the beauty of the language that they used in their songwriting as well as the music itself. And I think. I don't know. Something about Midnight Mass was I love it in a way that's very singular. I can't tell you exactly how and why, but like my love of the Beatles like spills into like all these other cups of my life. Whereas Midnight Mass is its own kind of thing that lives within my love of story. It's probably my favorite vampire story. I would say. And, the fact that they never even call it a vampire, or it's an angel, it's, I don't know. It just felt right to talk about Midnight Mass.
It's definitely topical. The whole aspect of people being in denial about what the monster they care for is, right? This is not a monster. This is what we all need. And I think that's very topical.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like the whole, in terms of vampire stories, as a person who gets vampire pitches all the time, it's really rare for someone in this day and age to come up with a vampire story that you haven't seen before, haven't heard of before, that is totally unique and just can like blow it out of the water and make you go, wow, I guess all the stories about vampires haven't been told yet. Because this one was just so different. And so, and you're right, I didn't even say the word vampire. If I hadn't known, I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm just.
If you hadn't known what, if you had known what, the suspense.
Ahead of time that it was a vampire.
Gotcha.
Easter, death, resurrection, rebirth, like the coming back as your most perfect self, of course the body and the blood of Christ. Like, it was just so many of these things folded together so neatly and so beautifully. You could see how they could see this as this incredibly beautiful thing. Father Paul continues to remind folks throughout this series that every time they saw an angel in the Bible, they were afraid. So when you see this angel in the series and you're fearful, it is normalized because you're supposed to be afraid. This is what happens. Even when Moses saw the burning bush, he was afraid, and using those old stories that we're familiar with, because being Methodist, it wasn't the hardcore. We had a lot lighter than you Catholics, but we still had the old story. Paul, Saul on the road to Damascus. And seeing and the light that threw him from his horse, and he being reborn as Paul, and this is what happened to Monsignor Pruitt on his way on the road to Damascus, being like literally lost instead of figuratively lost as Saul was. And he's on the road, and it's told beautifully with these woodcuts, these wood blocks, it's just the thought that went into this thing was just amazing. And the ways in which that, I think if a person never had vampire lore or didn't see a bunch of vampire stuff, they could just see this as this, they could see this as so many, it works without knowing anything about vampires. You could think of it as it's a complete biblical story. Maybe this thing's a demon and not an angel. Maybe, it still could very well be the case, right? So just brilliant.
I love how the visualization of denial, right? Even when, what's her name? Bev. When Bev is trying to get him to give that sermon, and the sunlight's there, and he's all, there's a problem, right? Sorry for the spoilers, but it's so wonderful because there's this evidence, and they can deny this evidence. There's this evidence that really God's not going to let you out into the sun. Your perfect being. Let me get this right. Your perfect being can't go out in the sun, and that's God. Right? And they're like, sure.
Well, also it's really hard. They do a really good job because, vampires are romanticized.
Right.
Who wouldn't want to live forever? All that stuff.
None of that.
But they do, where it's like, now you can be younger and be the best version of yourself, and you're not sick anymore, and you can walk again, and you don't have dementia, and it's just so attractive.
That's always a nice bill of goods.
Yeah, and it's like, and nobody wants to admit it, but everyone's selfish. They all want that for themselves.
Right.
I don't care how godly they are.
Yeah, I think the thing that turns off most people in the series, those who choose not to partake, like when Sarah, the town doctor, there's a point in which she has the opportunity. I don't want to spoil this. It's a beautiful moment, and she doesn't take it. She spits it out, and it's one of the cruxes of this entire series. Like, this is one of the reasons why Father Paul came to town, for this hope of this dream that he always harbored, and now it can be so, right? Where they can be a family and all this. And I think one of the reasons why Sarah probably turns away from this is not so much the horror of not being able to walk in the sun again, but having to live with Bev Keane for all eternity. It's like, in their world, it's like, oh, we're going to be together. Like, we're going to be together. Like, no,
sorry.
Pass.
One of the things that really landed for me in about the show was that it's very clever, but it doesn't feel like it's clever for the sake of being clever. It feels like really earned and incredibly thoughtful. And there's a lot of horror content the last couple of years that by the time I got to it, my expectations were so high because I love, now it's elevated horror. To me, it's just like a great horror story. But it can't just be like a riff on the thing that you've seen before. There needs to be reasons for the decisions creatively. And I felt like that was something that the show was incredibly successful at. was just being thoughtful, being unique, but not being caught up in its own uniqueness.
Olvera Candles and Spirits presents the Joe Calavera Radio Hour. Joe Calavera, punisher of predators, friend of the friendless, and danger to the dangerous, has 48 hours to crack the case or back to the crypt he goes. Join us each week for another daring adventure of our undead PI. This week, our dead desperado is called upon to find the missing wife of a prominent bank president. Is it a case of a lost spouse? Or did the dear missus make a withdrawal from her honey's bank that she couldn't pay back? Tune in as our skull-faced flatfoot attempts to solve the case of the withdrawn wife.
This feels like one of those stories that where I'm just assuming that Flanagan didn't seek out like, oh, I need a good vampire story. I'm assuming this is one of those stories that like came to him in the dead of night, where he was like maybe, praying or, struggling or something. And somehow two things kind of linked together in his brain where it's like, oh, it's kind of like a vampire thing. And it kind of spilled out from there. Like it feels very, as you say, thoughtful in a way that it feels like it was like seeds were planted all his life. And this thing sort of started to grow up around the back of the house where he just kind of walked around that edge one day and you're like, oh, we're growing dandelion here. Okay. Like, what are we going to do with this? Yeah, very, very well earned, very well considered. Even moments where like, another very beautiful moment where Ali and Sheriff Hassan at the end of the series, Ali, the young man, is wrestling with his faith a little bit. He's Islam. He's Muslim, and he's considering the Catholicism. And at the end, when the sun is rising, he and his father, their reconciliation is praying at sunrise, as Muslims do. It was just like stuff like that was just super thoughtful and really beautiful and layered in this way that. And that might have been found as they were writing it, like that one thing, but like everything else must have been just like kind of layered in such a way that you're starting to see connections everywhere because you're just like you're living in this world together. It's true,
and they utilized like everything. There was no throwaway lines. Like I noticed that it's like so tight because it had to be it was 7 episodes, but like something that I thought was a throwaway line is when. I think it was Sturge that said that I heard rumors that the priest was sleeping around with other women or something like that. And I thought that was just like a throwaway line because, you just dismissed it. He was like, oh, okay, whatever.
That was Joe Colley.
Yeah. That was Joe Colley. Oh, that was Joe Colley that said that? Okay, yeah. And then later on, of course, it pays off, obviously. And it's just like, there was nothing in there that didn't have an alternate purpose or get tied up. Like it was just all very precisely done, which, is rare because I find the plot holes if there are plot holes.
One of the other things that I found really inspiring about the show is like his determination to tell this story. Like it was going to be a movie. It took him like 7 years, working not only through his addiction into recovery, but like literally the format, how he was going to tell this story had to evolve over that time because he needed all 7 of those hours. I can't even imagine with the 2-hour movie, like how you pack that in, right? Because it does feel like a show that's lived in. And one of the things that works about TV, like comics, is the serialized storytelling gives you a familiarity. You're going to return to these characters over and over again, and they can, if it's a long-running show, feel like family. And I feel like he used that convention incredibly well over the course of the show.
Very much so. And if it was, I agree. I was thinking about like if it was a movie, I don't think it would certainly not be as impactful, I don't think. And if it was any longer, we'd have too many shenanigans with Joe Colley, or or Bowl, or as his mom likes to call him, Bill, the drug dealer character. We had just enough, to establish who they are, what they were about, how they fit into this story, or the theme, of redemption or forgiveness or what have you, and then we moved along, and this was, you could tell this was very important to him, like very, very important to tell this story, and which is why I think it's such a good story.
Johnnie, speaking of, are there any moments in it that may have inspired you to try some things that you maybe not have tried before seeing it in your writing?
That's a good question. I don't think so. It just kind of reminds me about certain good habits. I always try to have all of my characters I'll have their own motivation, and their motivation should not align with the author, just trying to get this plot point across.
Sure.
So seeing how they did it is a nice reminder that everyone is actually doing things in their own best interest, and it just kind of works in this way that brings things together. And even with using a lot of the biblical analogies and stuff, none of it really felt too forced, and I think Warren says something of Warren, the younger brother of Riley, the younger Flynn boy, says something about like, at our last dinner together, if I'd have known we'd all been together, I would have told them I love them, or something like that. And it was just, there you go, Last Supper, you got Adam and Eve, you got the Ark, you got all these things, but it all made sense with the moment in time those characters, with the character and the moment in time they were living in. That was just very, very admirable.
I like the length of Bev's monologue when she sells the mayor and Sturge. The length of that monologue, that went on, but she held it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it was a moment where she had to, like, she's doing this all show long, but this was like, this is make or break, and she was really going for it, because at the end of it, the mayor isn't really even fully convinced. He just has to just start moving, just like, and then he just kind of just starts complying because she's off to the next thing. Yeah, that was really powerful.
Yeah, and Father Paul with his sermons, every Mass, it takes a really good writer to come up with those things that like are going to sway people in a congregation. Like it had to be good, really, really good. And I thought he really pulled it off. And the actor, Hamish Linklater, he did a fantastic job. Normally, I wouldn't think of him as being particularly charismatic, or like having that, like being able to sway people to his side. But man, like he was great in that role. He really was. Truly. Yeah, like that. And David, weren't you mentioning that his wife, Mike Flanagan's wife, is in all of these?
Yeah.
Watching these monologues of Father Paul, like, get more and more kind of militant as the show goes along. We're talking about armies of God, and we're talking about horrible things that we have to do, and so on and so forth, and taking the step out onto the water, and these leaps of faith and all this stuff, and the congregation not knowing Father Paul is they're kind of going along with it. Some of them are uneasy, but they don't know this person, so they don't really have a frame of reference of who he is. So maybe this is just who he always was. So when Mildred gets to the church, Sarah's mother, who was suffering from dementia before having the blood of the angel, she sees him for who he's become, and says, "This is not my church, and that's not the man I knew." And that's kind of the point in which that something has really changed with Father Paul, that it's not just his youth. Like this thing it's changing him in a way where he feels no guilt when he does this. This first act that, after his sort of resurrection of sorts, we'll say, and he becomes someone else. And I think when he talks to Riley about the more and more you go along and the more you'll hear the angel's voice, the less and less guilt you'll feel. Mm-hmm. He's becoming something else. And I think that's the moment where Riley decides to take the steps that he takes, when he realizes, like, Father Paul's trying to reassure him, like, you're going to feel less bad about this. You're going to become more and more, it's going to be easy to do this stuff. Where Riley has been struggling with every night he closes his eyes and he's beset by this guilt. And that's kind of one of the things that defines him. And now I don't know if that's because of his home training, because no one in the Flynn family partakes in any of the stuff that comes after. Now, is that good home training, or was he an example to the rest of them? Also, did he, Jesus died for our sins. Did he take a life for, their future, blah, blah, blah. I can't tie that together in the short period. There's something there that they were like this kind of moral center of the show, and they weren't perfect, and they weren't like, the dad, Ed, was on Riley's ass the whole time, but like out of love, a clumsy kind of love. But I don't know, there was like this kind of morality to them that Riley, that was the last bit of his humanity that he wanted to hold on to. And when Father Paul was just kind of like, don't worry about it, pal. We could just do this.
Yeah, and he was jealous. Riley was jealous of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let that denial take hold.
Yeah.
So, Johnny, who would you recommend the show for?
Oh, boy. Who would I? Oh, man. Jeez.
I'll buy you some time and bring you inside my own thinking on it, because I was talking to my parents about the show. Again, I was raised Roman Catholic, and I was like, this one's not for you guys, right? and it's a weird like push-pull where I do feel like if you were raised religious, you're going to have a real reaction to the show. But because of that, depending on where you are in your faith, it might not be a show for you at all, right? So you had a really interesting path in just because of your love of vampire lore.
Mm-hmm.
But would you recommend this to most people?
You know what? I would recommend it to lapsed religious people, maybe, who love story. Because you're right. There's a way in which the show might be seen as offensive to some, by taking all of these parts of this religion and using them or connecting them in a way that connects really well to vampire lore and to addiction. But as someone who was maybe, a step removed, but is very familiar, as a kid, I read the Old Testament, I read the New Testament. At church, I went every Sunday, I loved the music. I went to Sunday school. I loved my pastors. I loved the community. I liked all of it, there was just a moment where I had to come to grips with my lack of belief. And it was disingenuous for me to pretend otherwise. And this happened in my teens. And at that point, I decided to step away. But it didn't take away my appreciation for a lot of it and my love of a lot of it, And I think we as folks who grow up in a Judeo-Christian society, even those who aren't churchgoers, who are familiar with some of the stories, at least in part, So I guess I would say religious folks who are just kind of, who for one reason or another won't take too much offense to it, or people who are culturally religious, within this religious milieu.
There's a lot. That's a big group.
People that can handle that, their faith is strong. Not for the Bev Keens of the world. I think they started.
Exactly.
And it does a good job of not insulting the religion or belittling it.
No, for sure.
This is the most churchy show I think I've ever seen, and with this, and the ways in which people diverge from the teachings are the ways when things go wrong. When Lisa at the end, like she says a prayer for her family, and and Erin, she what did she say? She said something about something like she sort of paraphrases the Bible when they make their action. When they're trying to get the kids to the boat and they're trying to do these things. Like, so everyone's utilizing these teachings and these stories as fuel to motivate them forward.
Yeah.
So yes, it's super respectful, I would say.
It is. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, I have to agree with that.
Yeah.
So when you're watching TV, are you drawing at the same time? Are you sitting in front of an actual television? Are you watching on the screen?
I'm watching on a screen, usually a laptop. I found that whenever I draw while watching a show, I find that it's not a show that I should be watching because it doesn't catch my attention. Like I should just find something that I'll want to pay attention to, because these actors are giving it their all. The set design, the lighting, there's a lot of work that goes into stuff. So I like to respect other art forms, and and don't get me wrong, I like good trash TV, but I usually don't draw while watching that either, because I think I've already built up the muscle to like sit and stare when I'm watching things like Midnight Mass. So I don't watch a lot of stuff. I wait for like really good recommendations, and then I'll kind of dive in to the. Yeah,
that's very admirable. I like that you respect the art form. That's great. Not a lot of people do that.
Well, there's so much to consume nowadays, huh?
Yeah, there is a lot to consume, that's for sure.
Actually, Gossip, this is a question for you. Do you draw while you watch TV or no?
No way. I can't do. No. I can listen to instrumental music. That's it. Most of the time it's silence. My family is Spanish, so I think it goes back to the monks. I can't do anything. When I'm at the table illuminating manuscript, all I can hear is some Gregorian chanting. That's about it. No lyrics. No, I cannot. There's no way. How are you supposed to draw and then look at a screen and then draw and look at a screen? I just don't. That's impossible for me. Yeah, so no, I can't watch things and draw. No way.
And will you put on, like, if you are going to listen to music and it's instrumental, will you put on like the same music while you're working on that project, or mix it up?
Thanks to my love affair with ADHD, I absolutely love to like listen to the same thing over and over.
I'm sure you guys have talked about the Mambo Number 5 Stephen King situation, right?
No, please go on.
So Stephen King famously can listen to music while writing at this incredibly super speed and that very high level. Like he'll listen to like metal, he'll listen to whatever. He'll put it on and just start punching at the keys. Well, apparently at one point in time, he fell into like a loop where he was listening to the same song over and over again. And that song was Mambo Number 5. Yeah, and he just, I don't know how many books he wrote to that or a book or how many chapters, but it got to the point where I think his wife threatened that she was going to leave if he didn't stop with that Mambo Number 5.
So. That's amazing.
No, it's true. Repetitive. Sometimes you want to listen to the same thing over and over again. At least I do, but.
Yeah, I fell into I don't know what happened, but there was this song from Level 42 called Something About You.
I love that song.
Yeah, that thing was on a loop for me for like 2 weeks this summer, and I don't know why. And I just gave myself over to it. I'm just like, all right, this is happening, and it's a good song. I like it.
I love that song. It is on my main playlist. Is Level 42 Something About You. I love that song. It came out the summer I graduated high school, so.
Oh, there you go. It's perfect. Perfect time.
Yeah. That's crazy. I've never heard anyone else mention that song. Thank you, Johnny. Thank you. I'm not alone.
Now I got
right person at the right time to talk about that.
Oh my goodness.
All right, David, do you want to do the
I was going to stick with the music front because I felt like the Newton brothers who did the score did such an amazing job. But fun fact, they also did the theme to X-Men 97, which I have not watched, but I'm imagining it's a very different vibe. Did the Midnight Mass score then for you, Johnny? Given that you did go to Mass and
yeah, I thought it was really beautiful. I loved the a cappella singing, the choral singing, I should say. Mm-hmm. Really beautiful, really soothing, and it also worked in a haunting kind of way as well. Without like certain things could be very scary without it being scary. I don't know how it was like a magic trick or something how they did that, because they didn't have a lot of intentional spooky stuff in there. I mean, there was that kind of like sound that they would do when something would happen. That was a little spooky, or at least it would call your attention. It would call you to attention pretty quickly. But I was thinking quite a bit about the score and like wondering if that's one I should like try and listen to, or if I should just like let it live with the show, because sometimes they can couple really well, and other times you just kind of want the whole experience to sit together, you know.
All right, we do have a question from friend of the podcast, Jonathan James, who's the editor-in-chief of The Daily Dead. And this is going to take us off on a very different tangent, so everybody get ready. If an ancient being offered you to turn into a bloodthirsty creature of the night, would you take them up on the offer? Why or why not?
What are the circumstances? Like my circumstances now?
Your circumstances right now.
And that would be a bloodthirsty creature of the night.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be like a vampire, or is it just kind of like any kind of old... I'm trying to write my way out of this.
Let's say it's like Father Paul, right? If you had the Father Paul.
I'm imagining a long scene where Johnny's trying to negotiate the terms with the vampire for him, right? Like, what time do I have to get up, right?
Exactly. When is sunset? Is it like sunset, or is it when it's a little?
I would savings.
I would say no. I would. There is now I'm not looking to shuffle off this mortal coil anytime soon, but there is as a creative person, I do like a deadline. You know, it motivates me to get things done. You know, so I would be the worst bloodthirsty creature of the night. I'd put everything off. I'd just kick back. I would like lay in the grave for like weeks at a time, just kind of contemplating the inside of the coffin, and then I'd be except for when I went out for blood, and I would just stare at stuff for a long time, thinking, I got time. I'm like, I'll get around to other stuff, and that might be a boring existence, or I might be more mindful, but I'm going to say no. What about you all?
No way. Similar reasons, like drinking blood.
Drinking blood, that's the problem?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, killing a human being and drinking their blood is the problem. I don't want to become a murderer. I watch too much Supernatural.
What if it's only bad people?
That's great, because
slippery slope.
As the Catholic, as the one who knows the hymns, you're like, you can already go into that denial, like, it's just going to be bad people, right? It never works out that way. Before you know it, it's someone who is incredibly dear and good. Like in story, it always works out that way. That it always comes to, you're going to kill the most beautiful thing, right? Especially if this was anime. If this was anime, you kill like the most precious being in the universe is the one you'd end up killing and be like, how did you come this far?
Yeah, I would not do it either, though, simply because I'm not a night person. I like the day.
I do love the sunlight, too. It's true. I'm more true. I do love sunlight. That would be a drag.
Yeah, it would be.
What about you, David?
Depressing.
Yeah, it's a hard pass for me, but I would be fine with drinking the blood. Like, that's not an issue for me.
Why would you say no?
It's just, I do think that one of the things that's profound about watching the show and is that you have the sense of like just the natural cycle of life, right? And I think it's sort of important to respect that. Not to add on too much of a heavy note, but it's actually a great transition to something I really have been thinking about. I binged the last 3 episodes all at once, like back to back to back, which was intense way to watch the show. And without spoiling it, as much as we can do this, there's a great line in the final episode, which is, "I'm deciding they did."
Yes, I thought about that line too.
And it really opens up like how you respond to the show, right? Because you've seen this really powerful creature. You've seen a destruction of this place. And at the end, do you feel like it's a hopeful ending, or is it a melancholy ending?
I thought about this, and I thought about when we come back to, we do a take 2 on Aaron's, what happens when you die. We return to everyone singing on, together. They come together and they sing as, the sun's about to rise. You have Ali and Sheriff Hassan praying. You see everyone at peace, except for Bev. She's the only one kind of freaking out. We see the Monsignor and Mildred, on the bridge with Sarah, and they kiss at sunrise. It's this very beautiful thing because everyone, spoiler, everyone don't listen. Everyone dies, except for our Adam and Eve at the end, Lisa and Warren, and so I think they needed to let us down easy because, man, if they didn't do that, it would just be like hitting a hard wall at the end where, and even when Lisa has that line where she says, "I can't feel my legs," and it's like kind of a victory because there needed to be a victory for the sacrifice that they all made, So if it was just like, well, the creature got away, it's just like, oh man, it's a hard ending. And I wonder how much they had to think about massaging that thing to get it to feel where we can leave without, staying awake that night, staring at the ceiling. So I find it hopeful, but they had to make it hopeful, like with a lot of work, because if you just look at events, it's not very hopeful.
I actually love Bev's final sequence because when she's staring out to the water, she actually looks peaceful and thoughtful for the first time. And then it breaks. And then she starts digging
a hole.
Right? And it's such an amazing storytelling moment. I just love that. Right.
And them not being familiar with vampire lore, it wouldn't have occurred to them that, just bury yourself in the earth. And of course, Bev, being the smartest person in town, would figure it out.
Yes.
But too late,
Yeah. Too late. Yep, too late.
She should have gotten an Emmy for that. That really was a great performance.
That was one of the best. Samantha Floyan, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but fantastic.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, I do love that he uses the same cast members over and over again. The actor who's from iZombie was absolutely amazing. Who's the sheriff in Midnight Mass? And then Henry Thomas, who was Elliot in E.T. I think it's just a phenomenal actor working for Flanagan, and he doesn't prepare to work for anybody else. So it's great to have him back on screen.
Yeah, it's such a great job in this as this father who's kind of clumsily trying to connect with his son, but he's angry with them, and it's oh man, well done by the entire cast.
Everybody had such great relationships to each other. It was so good. Everybody, you could tell every time they did a scene, you got their relationships down. It's oh yeah, this is how it's going. And it was very natural and very true to life. And I thought it was hopeful too at the end. I mean, if only because, when they say the phrase, I'm deciding they did, well, they did, so it was good. It was a good thing. And also you weren't left wondering what was going to happen. It's you got an ending. So not often you get an ending, that's okay, there's nothing. So I liked it. They did.
I appreciated that because there was a way in which you could have spun this thing off and but then it would have lost its, much like the life cycle that we were kind of talking about, it would have lost its oomph if it was now, after, 7 seasons and, 100 episodes of this thing, it would have, the impact of it would have just been watered down to the point of, oh, now it's about, Sturge's Night Out, instead of
Assassin's Creed Midnight Mass.
Exactly. Where it's about what it's about, and it's this beautiful testament and achievement by everybody involved. It's amazing. I mean, it's 4 years later, and I'm still thinking about it, and we're talking about it now. So hopefully more people will see it. I don't know how well it did because I only heard it from a friend, and I've only talked to friends who I've recommended it to or who have seen it. So I don't know how popular it is, but it's one of the best TV shows I've ever seen.
Which brings us to tonight's sponsor, Netflix. Hey, kids. Do you like Netflix?
If only we were sponsored by Netflix. Jeez.
I was rehearsing. That's it. Manifesting.
The other thing, as we talk about the ending, that makes it so impressive is Flanagan has adopted a lot of Stephen King material, right? And at a pretty high level. Stephen King's really fascinating writer, not great at endings. And so the fact that like this show does land the ending, I thought was incredibly impressive.
Truly.
That's a fact.
Before we wrap up, Johnny, is there anything that you wish more people knew about Midnight Mass or Mike Flanagan or vampire lore?
Oh, well, I all I know about Flanagan is the the two movies and the other show I've seen. I've kind of since Midnight Mass was my first kind of exposure to him, and it's so dear to me. I did the opposite thing that a person does in fandom, where a lot of times you run to it and you want to read up and learn everything. Yeah. I've kept myself like in the dark because it's so. I just love it for what it is. So I don't know much about Mr. Flanagan or a lot of his life. I've kind of kept myself in the dark. I do know that he uses the same cast, and I just wish more people will see it and appreciate it. And as for vampire lore, I don't know if I'll make a recommendation. How about that?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
I think that astounded me. The new Nosferatu was it's like I don't know if you all have read Bram Stoker's novel of Dracula, but it's it's very of its time. It's very like kind of purple prose and like very flourishy, and I don't say that as an insult, but it is. It's very kind of flowery and stuff, and a lot of it's just these beautiful scenes or interesting scenes, I should say. That a lot of it doesn't really tie together really well. It's just kind of like interesting snapshots of poetry, but doesn't really tie together as a story so well. This Nosferatu takes that and it like improves on Stoker's work, and it improves on the original, not original Nosferatu, but the copyright sidestep that was the first Nosferatu. And kind of makes sense of a lot of the stuff that's left dangling. So I find it was really well done. It was like kind of went back and retroactively fixed Stoker's book and fixed the story of Count Dracula or Count Orlok as he is in Nosferatu. So check that out if you've read Dracula and didn't like it. Watching Nosferatu, it might ameliorate the situation.
Thank you so much for reminding me, because I missed Nosferatu. I can't believe it, but I did. And so thanks for reminding me. I really got to see it.
Yeah, and I did not like Dracula when I read it. I didn't. I had to read it in school. Mm. Yeah. In purple. College. Yeah.
So flowery.
God, yeah, it was a little much. Yeah. But I mean, granted, I had to read a lot of classics and I was pretty sick of them. So, yeah. That's probably not a good thing to say.
That's fine.
What did you like about it? Was it just the style of writing, or?
Yeah. It's okay. Like, why are they classics? Like, they're not that good, right? I mean, has anyone ever tried to read Moby Dick here?
I have read Moby.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I love Moby Dick, but I understand what you mean about classics in general. It's every once in a while you connect with the classic, and
I mean, A Tale of Two Cities, I loved, but that was like the only one.
This could be a whole other podcast because
yes, Johnny Christmas Part 2 classics,
right?
Let's do it.
Scarlet Letter was pretty good too, but
yeah.
Between
Scarlet Letter was good.
Yeah.
But here's what I love about classics, though, is that it gives us a way, like just a source material that we can all like relate back to.
Reference, yeah, it's true.
Read or appreciated each one, and I feel like the more we move away from that, it is not great. That like your core text just becomes the new Marvel movie, as opposed to like a story that may be outdated or had purple prose, but it has something that works on a story level or a character level that has survived generations. And I find it's like just really rewarding when I can go and find the ones that work for me. So like parts of Moby Dick, total slog. And then you get 3/4 of the way through and you have, for me, and then you have the chapter just on white. And I was like, okay, the whole journey was worth it for this. And did the book land for me completely? No, but there were parts of it that I absolutely loved. And also that sense of accomplishment you have from finishing a classic. I mean, finishing any book, frankly. But especially when you're like, oh yeah, I got that done. I'm still struggling to finish Dracula. Like, I hear you. And I bought a new edition of Dracula, like the Edward Gorey illustrated version this year, just for the Edward Gorey illustrations, right?
Right.
I sat down and I'm like, man, this year I'm going to do it. I was like, oh man, the text is the same as it was last year.
Not even Edward Gorey could make it better.
Maybe next year. Normally, this is where we say to our guests that you can drop up, and you certainly can, Johnny, no reason to stay, but we do, every episode of the Superfan podcast is accompanied by a cocktail, a mocktail, and a dessert recipe inspired by the guest and or the conversation. So if you want to stick around and you want a good recipe or 3, you can stay right on. If not, but thank you so much for joining us today. Seriously, it was.
Yes, Johnny, thank you so much. This was great. Thanks for your time.
It was a real fun time.
Yeah, thanks so much. This was awesome. This was great. Yeah, I'll stick around. I'll hear.
All right, yay.
Right. If only you were in LA, and then we could go and I could make this cocktail for all of us, because the cocktail sounds delicious. I've not had this one yet, but it is the appropriately named Midnight Mass cocktail. It comes to us from the folks at Death and Company. And it has rum, cardamaro, and Benedictine, and a dash of bitters with an orange twist.
What's cardamaro?
It's, I'll next time you come over, I'm going to make this cocktail.
Cool.
What's Benedictine?
Yeah, Benedictine. That's so perfect for the Catholic.
I love Benedictine.
What is it?
It's like an herbal liqueur. Yeah. Some of my liquor I know like the history of. I really just don't with Benedictine. But
Sure.
Very unique taste. All right, so given the themes of this show, it made an awful lot of sense for us to also have a mocktail paired. And so we have the Midnight Margarita, which comes from the website Witchcraft Cocktails. And if you want the recipe to these drinks, head on over to the Superfan Signal Substack, and we will share the recipes with you. But wait, there's more. Chris, do you also have a dessert recipe for us?
I sure do. It is called Angel's Blood Affogato. So I don't know if anybody's familiar with affogato, but it's a lovely, lovely dessert.
Love it.
That is basically espresso poured over ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
However, this is inspired by, of course, Midnight Mass. And you get the ice cream, you get the espresso, but you add some cherry syrup, like the kind that you would put on top of your ice cream. You add some dark cocoa powder. And for a garnish, chocolate shavings or maraschino cherry. And of course, how to prepare it will be found on the Substack, the Superfan Signal.
I want that so bad right now.
I'm scrolling down on these instructions, and step 1 is prepare the blood.
I know.
Prepare the blood.
Prepare the blood, brew the darkness, assemble, and then finish with temptation. Yep.
Well, thank you, everybody, for listening. This has been our conversation with Johnny Christmas. Go check out Midnight Mass. Also, check out Life of Chuck. I thought that was an incredible movie, maybe my favorite American movie of the last 5 years.
And also look for the books of Mr. Johnny Christmas. Thank you again for being here, Johnny.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This was wonderful.
The Superfan Podcast is a production of Superfan Media. This episode was edited by Bryant Dillon with production help by Fanbase Press. The Superfan Podcast logo is designed by Chriswell Lappin, whose design work can be seen at chriswelllappin.com. The theme song was written by friend of the podcast Dan Schulman and performed by Low in the Shag.
And now, a word about our sponsors. Fanbase Press is the media award-winning and an Eisner and Harvey Awards-nominated comic book publisher and geek culture website. Fanbase Press produces new and distinctive works, as well as daily reviews, interviews, and podcasts that span the pop culture spectrum and give voice to the themes, ideals, and people that make geekdom so exceptional.